What's up, everybody? I'm Maria Martin, and apparently the Falcons could still make the playoffs statistically, except I don't know that they will.
I'm Aaron Freeman, and back another Therapy Monday, for free. So it's our gift to you guys.
I'm Jarvis Davis, and should we be giving grace at this point?
ATL! ATL! Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons Squad. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
Welcome into the Falcons Squad Show. I'm your host, Jarvis Davis, and riding with me today, I have my main man, Aaron Freeman, who is the host of Locked On Falcons, and I have Maria Martin, who is an all-out rock star for 11 Alive. I want to start off by saying thank you for making the Falcons Squad your first listen of the day, and also to all the listeners and viewers who have been on this ride with the entire Locked On Network. I want to thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and your bet wins. You'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. The Falcon Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every single day, baby. We're right here for you. Coming up on today's show, the Falcons keep finding a way to lose. Has Raheem lost the offense? And the struggle bus is real on third downs. But first, guys, we have to talk about Michael Penix Jr. He had another day where you felt like he left a little meat on the bone. He was 12 for 28. He only averages about 6.3 yards per attempt, which is not all that great. And some of the inconsistencies showed up yesterday in a big, big way. Maria, I want to start with you. Are you at a point right now, about halfway through the season, where you're starting to question whether or not Penix can be a legit starter in this league?
Yeah, maybe unpopular, but no, I'm not. And I think it's just because he's a young quarterback, and that's not an excuse. We've talked about this for a long time. Yes, sorry, everyone. If you didn't listen to me yesterday, I have no voice right now, but it's coming back. Don't worry. So I think Michael Penix is young and he's going to struggle, and we're riding out the pains of a young quarterback right now. Unfortunately for the Falcons, this is their only option, and it has to work because of the way it went down with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix Jr. You are literally forced into saying you're going to ride it out with this guy no matter what. And we knew this was going to happen whenever the keys were turned over to Mike, when Kirk obviously was not exactly what the Falcons thought they were getting in Kirk Cousins. They thought they would get at least 2 years as him as the starter, and then Mike could develop a little bit slower behind him. Yeah, not the case. So kind of thrown into the fire a little bit. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating when you see all of the other offensive pieces that this team has built over the years around Mike. And a lot of people think that automatically means it's going to be firing on all cylinders. I don't think that's the case. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. I think Mike obviously has to play better. He knows that as well. But it's not just him. You know, there are situational things that are making him be unsuccessful at times. And I think that there is a lot of finger pointing going around right now. I am just not ready to pull the plug on him as a quarterback, especially because he doesn't even have a full year as a starter in the National Football League as a quarterback. He doesn't. He had 3 games last year, and then we're 9 games through this season. Not one full season has he played as the starting quarterback of an NFL franchise. It's really hard to do, in case anyone needed reminding. So I think, patience is important in this scenario. That's not the answer that people want to hear. And I'm certainly not telling people to be patient, because I understand when you have a playoff drought to this caliber, you're frustrated. But I think what makes it worse is if this doesn't work out, just hypothetical, if the Mike situation at quarterback doesn't work out, then where does that leave you? It leaves you with starting over yet again. So I think it's being patient is one of the most important things you can do with a quarterback like this right now, because if you give him a little bit of time, maybe it starts to turn around. I really don't think it's all his fault.
Yeah, and I think it's about managing the expectations too, because you were sold a bill of goods with Kirk Cousins. I was not on board with that signing. I just didn't think that a guy who had a super major injury late in his career was going to just be able to bounce back and everything's going to be all hunky-dory when he stepped back onto the field. Just didn't think that. Now, it looked like that for the first 9 games, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I think that when you make certain decisions and then you have to clean them up and you have to get your mop out almost immediately, almost like 6 months later after you made that decision. So it just compounds a lot of things. And then you go and get another quarterback and bring him into the fold. And then you say, okay, like you mentioned, you give him the keys and say, hey, save us. Be the foundation of this offense. Average 26 points a game, or 27 points, or 28 points. It's starting to go back down now, Freak. Whatever it is, it was at 28. Now I'm going down. Like I'm lowering my expectations. You know what I'm saying? Because this is a therapy Monday, and I better start lowering my expectations because I'm going to go crazy if I continue to raise them or keep them that way they were coming into the season. But I think, Maria, you make a great point that we are at a point now where you have to understand that Michael Penix is a guy who's going to need patience. He's going to need to be given grace because he hasn't started for a full year. And even Drake May, all the praise and everything else that he's been getting, he looks like a young quarterback. He does.
Yeah.
He absolutely does look like a young quarterback in his league. He's making mistakes, but they're just figuring out ways to win games. And unfortunately, the Falcons haven't been able to do that in the last couple of games. So, but I think for you, Free, what I think you questioned Zach Robinson last year. There were a lot of things that you didn't like that you saw in him. But when we're talking about the quarterback, just the quarterback, Michael Penix, right now, looking at him, his body of work, small body of work, we pointed that out as well. Do you feel like he could be a legitimate starter in the NFL right now?
I think the potential is there, but I certainly think it's fair to question if we're going to get there, unless we see that improvement as what Maria is talking about. Like, I'm willing to give him the grace of, like, let's give him 5 or 6 more games to get to a full 16 game or 17 game number of starts before we can make not necessarily a final judgment, but a more definitive judgment to see where is he after a full season's worth of starts. But there are certain elements of Penix's game that I do think are kind of yellow flags in terms of, if these things don't improve, like, it's going to be really hard for him to be a high level starter that you need to be in order to be the franchise quarterback for the Falcons, right? That's some of the accuracy issues. That's some of the ability to create off structure, because if that first read isn't there, right, whether it's because the receiver didn't get open or you didn't scheme it up correctly, if you can't get to a second answer consistently, you're going to struggle in this league if you don't necessarily have the level of play calling, the level of receiver play, which is currently plaguing the Falcons right now and contributing to that issue, to find the right answers when it's not initially there. Some of the play action stuff I do think is a concern. And attacking all areas of the field, some of the middle of the field stuff, I think is a concern. But at this stage, to me, it's more yellow flags on, these are the things that, watching week in and week out, I want to see Penix show growth. I think there have been steps forward. There have been somewhat steps back in that regard. I think last week against the Patriots, it was a big step forward in a lot of those areas. This week, I think it was a small step back in those areas. And so as we look at these chunks of games over the next month or so, you want to see those steps continually be made forward, because if you're not sitting here 6 weeks from now or 8 weeks from now feeling good about Penix's development in those areas, those are major concerns that if they don't improve, it's going to be really hard for him to be a high-level starter and be compared to the Drake Mays and others in this league. But, Drake May started 12 games as a rookie, so he kind of went through all those growing pains in his rookie season and then could sort of hit the ground running. Unfortunately for the Falcons, Penix is going through a lot of those growing pains at this point in time, and we'll see how the rest of the season goes for him and his team. And then obviously we'll see what's going on in the future in 2026 and beyond. But certainly I think you're looking at this season and next season as, you want to see that growth from Penix. We'll see if he can get there. But then at that point, there is a possibility that if you don't see that type of growth over the next year and a half for Michael Penix, that, when the Falcons get a first round pick again in 2027, they may be in the market for a quarterback. And if that is the case, that's going to be extremely unfortunate, because then you're right back to, as Maria said, where you kind of started, where we're still searching for, the long-term heir apparent for Matt Ryan, at that point, 6 years later. And then does that grow into, 3 years of watching that guy develop and all that? So we might, before we realize it, we might be a decade after Matt Ryan being like, oh, we still haven't found a quarterback. And that is right now more of a concern to me today than it was maybe 2 months ago. But I'm not necessarily convinced that, that's going to be even bigger concern 2 months from now than it is today. So it can go either way, but I certainly think there are some yellow flags, but I'm not ready to give up on Michael Penix.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because like going back and watching some of the film, like there are things that I get concerned about, because it's been something that I've been continuing to see. Like, for example, like on the when he fumbled the ball and they got sacked, right? Like, this offense is so methodical. There's no way you shouldn't be able to identify protections, right? Because right before the ball was snapped, Elijah Wilkinson was basically turning around and saying, hey, man, this safety is out here. He was literally pointing at him before Michael Penix snapped the ball. And I'm sitting up here like, okay, there is some non-communication going on right here, because if your tackle is saying, hey, this is the guy you need to be worried about, and he still becomes a free runner, and then Chris Lindstrom, he tries to pick up the guy that was in the mug look, and he ended up backing out of there, and he's just sitting there with nobody to block. And then, of course, your center, he took himself out to play too. It's just so much stuff that's going on, and I think that part of it is the quarterback saying, hey, understanding what the protection should be, and then if it's not that, then you were wrong. But not recognizing it at all, that's not an option. That's where I get really concerned. It turns from a yellow flag, like you said, to, for me, it's like a red flag. I'm like, all right, bro, what is going on here? But I think overall, long term, I feel like Penix can be that guy, but it's just too much stuff that popped up yesterday in that game. And I was just like, man, I don't know. But I do think he can be a legitimate starter in this league. But before we wrap up this segment, I do want to kind of get your thought, Maria. Like, going back to the old Kirk Cousins piece, started at 6-3 last year, sitting at the top of the NFC South. Man, that seems like a long time ago.
It does. Like 2 lifetimes ago.
Right, a very long time ago. Now the Falcons are 3-6, and they're in third place in the NFC South with just one game in front of the New Orleans Saints, y'all. Good Lord. I know. Roll your eyes, Free. I heard me to say it. So just with that in mind, Maria, like with Michael Penix at the helm, are the inconsistencies in this offense simply predicated on who's at quarterback, or is it a little bit deeper than that? Or is it more so on Zach Robinson for not being able to adjust to what Michael Penix can do versus what Kirk Cousins was good at?
Yeah, I mean, we see that it's not the quarterback, right? And we saw that whenever Kirk Cousins had an opportunity to play this year as well. You can't just plug in any quarterback in this offense and expect them to be successful. There are deficiencies within this offense that are much larger than the quarterback. And I think that shows itself on third down a lot of the times. And a lot of the times they're getting in third and medium, third and long, and putting themselves in really impossible situations to convert those down in distances. I'm sure we'll talk about the third down deficiencies eventually. But to me, it's not just a plug and play quarterback situation. You always knew, as we're talking about, that the growing pains were going to be evident with Mike one way or another, no matter when you put him in, no matter what time it happened. You're seeing it in real time. He's a young quarterback in the NFL. Most quarterbacks go through these things. It is just inevitable. And it's hard to tell a fan base that has not seen the whiffs of a playoff scenario for almost a decade. We'll put it that way. It's hard to tell them to be patient with the quarterback. And I understand that. I understand that frustration. But I think that there are bigger issues on this offense beyond the quarterback. And I think there are certain scenarios that Mike is in too where he doesn't have a lot of help. And it's easy for a quarterback to get all of the blame. It's part of the position. You become a quarterback and you understand when things are really good, everyone looks at you and thinks you're the savior. When things are really bad, everyone looks at you and thinks that you're blowing up the football team by yourself. And so, no, I do not think it's a quarterback thing. And that is literally showing itself in real time where you plug Kirk Cousins in this season and it didn't fix your problems.
He looked awful, by the way. Just saying. Go ahead. My bad.
I think when we talk about the inconsistencies of the offense, it's kind of an all of the above. Like sometimes it's Michael Penix missing throws, and as you broke down, Jarvis, like missing a blitzer, a free rusher. Like you got to get rid of the football. You got to know. But
the
some of that is
grounding
like you don't have
over and over is crazy.
Yeah, and like sometimes he's not getting rid of the football because there's no hot reads because the offense doesn't recognize that the opposing team in an obvious passing situation is going to bring pressure. And it's like, hey, let's not have these 15-yard routes on a 3rd and 9 when there's pressure coming. We got to get the ball out quickly. And so that's part of it. Some of it's just simple breakdowns in offensive line play where, Lord knows on that final sack of the game, like Falcons defend a stunt challenge. Like they have yet to win that challenge this season. And then, a lot of it, especially when you compare it to last year, is the wide receivers aren't as good, right? We talked about this yesterday, where like a huge part of the difference between the offense in the first half of last year and the first half of this year is the presence of Darnell Mooney in the offense. And Mooney had a terrible game last week or this past Sunday or yesterday. And it's just another one of bad games that he's had throughout the season. And you're just basically playing with one wide receiver. And Bijan, shout out to Bijan. I thought he had a nice bounce back game. Unfortunately, circumstances dictated that he couldn't necessarily take over the game. Unfortunately, he could not get 244 yards rushing like another running back on Sunday. But I think
my skin crawl.
It's a lot of issues with this Falcons offense, and it would be nice if it was just one problem. And like it kind of starts at the top, and you just sort of like, well, if all of these issues are problems, then there's probably some person at the top that is responsible for these issues, and that's ultimately the person who's going to fall on the sword or basically be tripped onto the sword by people at large. And so whether that's Raheem Morris, whether it's Zach Robinson, that's just how this business goes. Sure. So, I don't think it's one person. I don't think it's the quarterback solely. It's a lot of issues. And ultimately that just kind of speaks to all the problems going on with the Falcons right now.
So, Aaron wants to fire Zach Robinson and Maria wants to fire Zach Robinson.
I didn't say that.
Totally understand. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, folks. That was me that said that. And I was joking. You know what I'm saying? I know Maria doesn't like the people to be jobless, you know what I'm saying? Especially in this market, man. So, but hopefully, and this is, I don't think I'm hopeless at this moment, y'all, but I'm getting pretty doggone close. Coming up next, how do the Falcons manage to lose games like this?
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it because it also helps you correct your form in real time, and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
We want to thank you for making the Falcons Squad Show your first listen of the day. And also want to thank all of our listeners and viewers of this entire network for making us the #1 sports podcast network in the land, baby. We're #1. You know what I'm saying? We're winners. Falcons. Now, Free, don't look at me like that, man. Don't do that.
I understand exactly your reaction, Jarvis, because we're #1. They're not #1.
No,
Thanks for still listening to us is basically the moral of the story.
Yes, thank you. See, Maria, that's what I'm talking about. You keep us on track right here. You know, you're the good angel. You know what I'm saying? You know, Free, you know, he's a little devil over there, you know what I'm
On your
saying?
shoulder.
Yeah, on my shoulder. He the devil on my
There's
shoulder.
me
you know what I'm
and
saying?
Aaron on your shoulder. Aaron's lighting papers on fire, which was my idea, by the way. And so I'm like an angel devil, I guess.
Yes. If you missed Locked On Falcons episode post-game reaction yesterday, please go check that bad boy out. It is legendary for sure. But I think that, you know, going into the break, we talked about like how the Falcons defense has been able to get to the quarterback in these past couple of games. You're talking about getting, you know, 7 sacks yesterday, a forced fumble, a pick. And the Falcons figured out a way to lose this game. I just don't understand it. So for you, Free, like, I know that they had a good performance as far as putting the quarterback on the ground last game. They had a good performance as far as putting the quarterback on the ground this particular game. Did you see this type of performance coming? And how do you manage to lose games like this? Like, where does that come from? I mean, how do you manage to lose games like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's very Falcony that we
Yeah.
spent 2 decades
Oh my
basically. If we get a pass rush, you know, it's going to solve so many problems. And then now the Falcons finally got a pass rush and hadn't really solved anything. It's like everything else has gone bad and gone sour, and that, you know, you put it in the back of the fridge and you forget about it for like 2 months, and then you start cleaning out your fridge and you're like, what is this green thing? Is that a lime? Oh, that was a potato or something, you know, juicy or whatever. Anyway,
Sorry, did this happen to
clearly
you?
I need to clean out my fridge.
Yeah. Wow.
I cleaned out my fridge this
A
weekend. So
lizard that
you
found
found
in your refrigerator right now.
but I was like, oh, I didn't know this was in here. I thought this was a lemon, and it's something that was not the color of a lemon. Anyway, that being said, how do the Falcons lose these games? I don't know, man. Like, when you ask, like, did I expect this type of performance from the Falcons defense? Not really, because watching last week's game, I'm like, oh, of course the Steelers were able to dominate the Indianapolis Colts in the trenches, right? Because they're the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's what they do. And I was like, I know the Falcons defense has made strides, but I don't think this defense is on that level. And then they went out there and were like, hey, we can do that as well. Well, I should say not dominate the game in the trenches, because they dominated the game in one phase, because Lord knows Jonathan Taylor ran for 244 yards. So
Yeah.
clearly they did not dominate that aspect of the trenches. But in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback, like, you know, it's just funny when you look at this game where it's just like they were so thoroughly butt kicked in the run game, but did the butt kicking in the passing game. And it just goes back to something that Jeff Ulbrich said, you know, after the draft, was like, we're built to play with leads. And it's like, yeah, you showed that in this game, because if the Falcons had a lead for most of this game, that pass rush would have been unleashed, and, you know, instead of 7 sacks, we might be talking about 9 or 10 sacks potentially. But it's so challenging when you're the Falcons, and it's just like you finally get a pass rush, and then it's like, well, it doesn't really matter. So I don't know, man. It feels very Falcony.
Yeah, and the other part of that, I think that when you look at where they are, where this defense is right now, and you talk about playing with leads and doing those type of things, like just looking at how the Colts were able to figure out a way to win that game, like you fully understand that Jonathan Taylor should be an MVP candidate, like hands down. Because when the Falcons forced the Colts in a throwing situation, Daniel Jones looked like Daniel Jones. He wasn't no Danny Dimes. No. because the Colts came out that first drive, they went 13 personnel. Like, yep, we about to run the ball down your throats. On first down, we sticking that bad boy and pulling that bad boy out, and we trying to catch these tight ends streaking down the seam. Jesse Bates made a good play on third down in the red zone, but like overall, they were getting chunks of yardage to get down to the get down the field. So I think that, and that goes back to, can I reveal my soul a little bit, just a little bit, y'all?
Yes.
I was so impressed by Shane Steichen and his play calling, the setup, the flow, everything just flowed. Like when people are expecting you, you give them a certain look. Oh yeah, 13 personnel. Yep, they about to run the ball. Nope. We know that you watch our film. So guess what? There's a thing called self-scouting. And we know that you're going to expect us to run the ball on first down, especially when we have 3 tight ends on the field. We got a legitimate MVP candidate in our backfield. But no, here's what we're going to throw y'all off. This is what we're going to do. We're going to trick all the little second level linebackers that y'all have, and the slow reading ones and number 40, and the fast reading ones and number 42. And we're going to get them in situations where it's not going to be ideal. And that's exactly what they did. And I just admire that so much. Why is it so hard for Mr. Robinson to do the same thing? But we talked about the offense. I just had to get that off my chest because I admire good football, and I want to point it out when I see it. But for you, Maria, when you think about where this team is and what this defense has been able to accomplish just from a stat standpoint, and they figure out a way to lose this game, how do they get to that point? Or how do they figure out a way to lose a game in which, like Aaron mentioned, like we've been begging for this for about 10 years, and they still figure out a way to lose?
Yeah, I mean, how long do you have? We could go down.
This is therapy Monday, so all of us are on the couch right now at this point. We're not physically laying on the couch, but mentally, I'm on the couch right now, and we talking about this thing.
It is. I mean, I said it yesterday. Good teams find a way to win and bad teams find a way to lose. And that is consistently where the Falcons find themselves when you play well enough, for the most part, for 4 quarters to win a football game, talking about defensively, because we know the offense really did not help them at all. And then in overtime, you just kind of fall apart. And you watch the Colts win the game, and deservedly so, in the way that kind of unraveled in the end. And for me, the defense, I think the only non-shocking thing for me is that we know the Falcons blitz more than anybody else in the NFL. Like, they're going to bring it. Their run defense is not good. We understood that. So we knew that Jonathan Taylor was going to have a good game. Didn't know he was going to run for 244 yards. Didn't know he was going to contribute 3 touchdowns. But we knew he was going to at least look as good as we know Jonathan Taylor is. And so I think that the most surprising thing to me is that they consistently find ways to lose in different ways. Does that make sense? That's surprising to me. It's always something new. It's like, oh, they're going to figure out a way to lose here. It's funny. I was sitting at work yesterday during the game, and I am a very positive person, as many of you have come to know. I'm very optimistic. Still with this team, I show optimism a lot. Everyone around me was like, no, they're going to lose in overtime. I said, why would you think that? Like, I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be closer than you think. The Falcons could win this game. And they lost in overtime. And they found another way to lose in overtime. It is frustrating. I don't know. I don't even know where to go with that. I just think that the defense consistently, I think that's the most frustrating part to me, is that the defense consistently plays good enough to keep you in a game. And when they force turnover on downs, when they have strip sack and a fumble recovery, and you turn the ball over to the offense and they go 3 and out and they stall out, you just can't win football games like that. And they're doing what they can to keep you in it. And I think they did enough, but clearly not enough to win, because they found yet another way to lose.
Yeah. Real quick, Aaron and Maria, Aaron, you can go first. Is this on Jeff Obrick, or the players?
244
yards, by the way.
Yeah. I
A lot of
mean,
yards.
it's a lot of yards. I think it's more on the players, but like this has been an issue all season long for the Falcons not being able to stop the run. So you do have to question maybe the scheme a little bit because they haven't been able to stop anybody running the football. And you know, yeah. So I think it's more on the players, but there's a sliver of Jeff Ulbrich in there.
What about you, Maria?
I think that it would be slightly more on the players just because Jeff Ulbrich has brought a different mentality and approach to this defense that we haven't seen in a very long time. And you've seen really, really excellent shades of greatness from this defense. The consistency part is what's concerning. But there's still really good elements to this defense. And there's been injuries that have really hurt them a lot. Divine Diablo comes to mind. And then, you know, a lot of it, even Jeff is like, we're going to replace people by committee. It's just, I don't know. What are you going to do with that? You know? So I think that Jeff has the right idea. Jeff has this defense in the right direction. It's up to the players to implement that, in all fairness.
Yeah. Speaking of implementation, Raheem Morris obviously hasn't done enough of any of that, right? Talking about fixing, we're going to fix this. We got to fix it. We got to figure out a way to win games. And we talked about right after the game yesterday, how he hasn't been able to figure it out. So now, is it time to put Raheem Morris on notice? We'll discuss. This episode of the Falcons Squad Show is brought to you by Rippling. If you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier. But now the average company is buried by hundreds of apps that slow down your teams and simply don't work together. That's not SaaS. That actually is very sad, just like the Falcons record. Software as a disservice. That's why you need Rippling. You need Rippling in your life. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance all in one place. They've helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. By uniting your employees, teams, and departments in one system, just one, Rippling removes the bottlenecks, busy work, and silos your software created. Whether you want to run your entire HR, IT, and finance operations as one, or just fill in the gaps in your software stack, Rippling can do it all. And right now, you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/lockedonnfl. That's rippling.com/lockedonnfl for 6 months free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, guys, we had a pretty serious conversation about Raheem Morris and what he brings to the table, what he's been discussing after games, and they're on a 4-game losing streak right now, and it seemed like to be the same message. I got a chance to check out some of the post-game comments from the players, and I think one that kind of really stood out to me, we'll talk about what Drake London said in the next segment, because I feel like that deserves a segment all in its own. But Bijan Robinson said, this was a tough one to swallow in the locker room after the game, and he wasn't his usual self. We know how Bijan is normally as a player, always a good, easygoing guy, smiling, always in a good mood, and that just wasn't the case. So, Maria, for you, do you feel like Raheem Morris has lost the locker room?
I don't, but I think that he's close to losing it. I'm around these guys all the time, and they are all pretty overtly positive, at least to us, or at least in front of a camera. Mm-hmm. And some of the reactions from the players in Germany have me concerned that it's close to them not believing in what this staff has to offer anymore. And that's sad. I mean, it sucks, because once that happens for a team, then you can kind of forget anything else the rest of the year. But I know it's easy for people to say that right now because they're 3-6 and they're on this downward slide, it feels like and seems like, and they are. But I think just the body language and the way that the guys were talking makes me feel like, yeah, I mean, he's definitely close, because for months now, I mean, I'm talking OTAs, training camp, when they were losing earlier in the season, after the Carolina game, they didn't talk the way that they did in Germany. And I think that that's why I'm really concerned that it's close to being lost in the locker room. These are guys that have consistently backed Raheem, consistently backed Zach Robinson, Jeff Ulbrich, Terry Fano. It doesn't matter. They believe in this franchise. They believe in the team, and they still do. You know, they still said some of that stuff. But I think it's just, I don't know. It's close.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore players' demeanor, players' language after games. You know, like just looking at, you know, Caden Ellis and him talking about that play that Jonathan Taylor broke, that 83-yard run that broke Bijan's longest run early in the year. It just, and basically their guys just admitting that, hey man, we just gave up on the play. Jalen Walker, the guy who is just the all-out guy that you know that he's going to give you everything he got on every single freaking play, and it shows on tape. And even he said, he was like, yeah, man, we thought the play was over, essentially. And to hear that and to have those guys verbalize those type of things, I feel like this is a space that when things like that start to come out, I feel like I'm with you on that one, Maria. It like, this is the steps. This is the street that you go down to lose your locker room. Yeah. So I feel like it's this one of those things where you have to continue to make sure that Raheem Morris has to, let me say this, Raheem Morris has to make sure that you find a way to get off that street. But I think for Free, as far as for you, how are you feeling when it comes to Raheem Morris having the command of the locker room, guys still listening to him, guys still believing in what he's saying? Do you feel like he's in the space where, kind of like Maria, where it's close, or do you feel like we're already here?
Well, I don't want to say we're already here because I don't know if we're here yet, but we could be, right? I think Sunday's game against Carolina will kind of tell us, right? It'll give us the answer to this question. I agree with Maria that I think we're trending in that direction. I don't know if we're actually here. But like this Sunday to me against Carolina is going to be a great litmus test for that, because we saw what happened the last time the Falcons played Carolina. They went on the road, they came out flat, they got thoroughly outplayed. Raheem and the whole team were like, yeah, that's not us, and all that stuff. And we've seen too many instances where it does look like that is what the Falcons are this season, particularly when it comes to some of these road performances, including, you know, some home performances against the Miami Dolphins. But the general trend this year has been this team is much better at home than they have been on the road. And so you're coming off a 4-game losing streak. You haven't won a game in the division, right? You have basically 5 winnable games the rest of the season against Carolina, against New Orleans, against the Jets, against the Cardinals, and then week 18 against the Saints. Those are the 5 games where the Falcons, in theory, should be favored over their opponents, and they should be expected to win those games. And then we'll see what happens with the other 3 games against Tampa Bay, LA, and Seattle. But like, if you're going to turn this season around, you have to win against Carolina, and you can't afford to come out flat at home. You know, you're probably not going to have the crowd behind you, as we discussed the other day, where it's just like, you know, ain't nobody blaming Falcon fans for not showing up for this product this Sunday. And so like, you're looking at this situation where it's like, if you're going to have a spine, if you're going to have a backbone, if your back is against the wall, if you're going to circle the wagons, all the cliches that we use, you got to do it this Sunday. And so to me, if you don't do it, that probably indicates that you have lost the locker room. And if you do it, then, you know, there's still maybe that fleeting hope for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, well, there is a city, this just come down the line, that that has lost that hope in their head coach, and that's the New York Giants. Brian Daboll has been fired. I think, when you think about the New York Giants right now as an organization, ever since Eli Manning's been gone, they just been making wrong decision after wrong decision, to the point where whoever they name as the interim coach, it has not come out yet, that will be their 6th head coach since 2016. And Maria, when you hear that, we talk about the New York Giants being a team that has won Super Bowls before, so they have some form of familiarity with how to run the organization. And you look at where they are right now. Should the Falcons be considering something like this, given how once you get into that mode of, hey, this is not the right guy, after a year and a half, 2 years, you might be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in a row, down the road, like Aaron mentioned, and you still haven't found your quarterback or your head coach.
Yeah. Reports are saying that Mike Kafka, their offensive coordinator, is going to be that interim head coach for now.
Yeah.
You know what it signals to me, this carousel of coaches in New York, the 6th head coach since 2016, especially with a Super Bowl winning franchise, is they understand the sense of urgency. Mm-hmm. And it seems chaotic to have that many head coaches in that short amount of time. And it is in a way, but they understand what it takes to win a Super Bowl. They understand what it looks like from the top down to win a Super Bowl. And they believe that they have that in Jackson Dart. He left the game, obviously, yesterday with a concussion. But they know that what it takes to win is making tough decisions, bottom line. And if you're the Falcons, you really have to take a good, hard look in the mirror. If you are coming out of the Carolina game, having been swept by Carolina on Sunday, their first game, as we all know, they want to forget about because it was embarrassing in every phase of the game. That's going to be bad. I mean, they would have to really take a good, hard look in the mirror at what do we want here? Because like I mentioned off the top of the show, statistically, the Falcons could still make the playoffs. Like they could. They would need a lot to happen, and they would have to win a lot of games, but they're not totally out of it. But it doesn't feel like they're anywhere close. And let's say you are at home, which, as you guys had noted, the Falcons have played a lot better at home. Let's say they don't look good again against Carolina and they lose that game. Then you're 3-7. And where do you go from there? So, yeah, I mean, when you see decisions like that, especially from a distance, and you're the Falcons, you have to understand there's pressure to make tough decisions yourself.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, making that tough decision is something that I question whether or not Arthur Blank is willing to make at this juncture. And I believe people want to talk about how Arthur Blank really likes Raheem Morris. I like Raheem Morris, but at the end of the day, it's all about that win column, and you got a lot more L's than you do in that win column. And if the scenarios you just laid out with them, a divisional opponent and a team that you were supposed to be better than coming into this season, and I wouldn't call anybody crazy for saying that. Shoot, I said it. I thought that the Panthers were going to, was a team that the Falcons should be better than. Now, I wasn't saying that they were as bad as a lot of people thought they were going to be, but I think that when you exceed expectations like Dave Canales has done down in Carolina, it goes to show you, that speaks to your coaching ability, right? Like if you can exceed expectations, that speaks to what he's capable of doing, and the staff that he's put together and the players that they have on that roster. And I think that Raheem Morris has not done that. Like, regardless of how high your expectations were and how low they are, like everything is below right now, and he's not meeting expectation. But for you, Free, I want you to wrap us up on this. Do you think Arthur Blank, if the scenario that Maria just laid out, Carolina comes into Mercedes-Benz on Sunday and they beat the Falcons handily? Let me just add that in there. do you feel like Arthur Blank will be willing to make the decision that everyone looking at the games and has looked at these games this year, he should make? Do you feel like he'd be willing to make that decision?
I think it becomes a possibility. Yeah, I think it becomes a possibility, especially if you add in the Carolina beats the Falcons handedly. I think it becomes a real possibility at that point in time. And I understand why Arthur Blank doesn't want to necessarily pull that trigger, because we're talking about a team like the Giants, who have basically been an unstable organization for the last decade, basically since they fired Tom Coughlin. Even those last couple of years of Tom Coughlin were not the most stable situation for that team. And the Falcons have been dealing with that same issue pretty much over that same period of time. And so you want to be this bastion of stability. We've heard from Arthur Blank in the past how he looks up to the Steelers and the Rooneys and sort of the consistency that they have. And you're not getting that here in Atlanta. And so you have to make the tough decisions, and as tough a decision as it would be for Arthur Blank to fire Raheem Morris, who we know he has a great affinity for. As you said, Jarvis, like at the end of the day, it's about the wins and the losses. And if you're not getting it done, and if you can't bounce back against this Carolina team, who right now are playing better football than the Atlanta Falcons are. And so it would not shock me at all if the Panthers beat the Falcons and do so handedly. But at the same time, like, something has to give at some point. And if you can't respond this week against Carolina, there's really, again, we've been saying that for the last like 3 or 4 games. Like, well, this Miami game, this is your bounce back game. They didn't bounce back. Okay, well, you got to figure out something on the road against New England in Germany against the Colts. They didn't figure it out. Right. And so it's like there's only so many times where you can say, well, they got to do this, and you don't do the thing. There are going to be consequences to that, and that potentially could lead to Raheem Morris' dismissal in as little as a week, and he'll follow Brian Daboll into the unemployment line.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. That would make me question a lot of things about the direction of this team going into the future, and trying to break this playoff streak that Maria laid out early on. All right, but coming up next, y'all, we talked about Raheem Morris and has he lost the locker room. I want to get into what Drake London said when it comes to how awful the Falcons being on third down. This episode of the Falcons Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Because, hey, man, the Atlanta Hawks, they don't have Trae Young right now, but they still out there balling. They just spanked the Lakers the other day. Man, get some excitement in your life in the city of Atlanta, baby. Man, you know what I'm saying? You got to be happy at some point watching sports. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting along with winning, especially when your team makes the late push. You know, that's what it's all about, baby, getting those dubs and being happy. And you can make a little money as well. So right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com and sign up and play your game with FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Wrapping things up on the Falcons Squad Show. Guys, Drake London was asked a question about their third down struggles. Now, mind you, the Falcons have been 8 for 40 on third down in their last 4 games. And Drake said, in response to that question about how bad they've been, he said, I just run the routes that I got. Free, when you hear wide receiver 1, the connection 9 to 5, they've been balling ever since Michael Penix Jr. has taken over. They got about 1,000 yards, you know, and in that time frame, they're leading. They're number 1 in that area. Do you think that Drake London and some of those other guys in that pass pass catcher room have lost faith in Zach Robinson as a play caller?
Maybe. Those comments from Drake London are, very, very interesting. And, I feel like we've seen that in past years with Drake where, because unfortunately for Drake London, like the Falcons have not been a very good team during his time. And there always feels like a point in the season where Drake London's like, look, man, I don't know. What do you want from me? I'm doing the best I can. And it ain't me, without saying that, without throwing his team under the bus or his coaches under the bus, but it ain't me. And I think most people that watch the Falcons are like, yeah, it's not Drake. Drake's not the problem. He's not the one out here dropping passes like some other receivers were in this game. He's not out here missing throws, throwing out of bounds and whatnot instead of throwing catchable passes. And he's not out here, scheming up some questionable things. So, like, I get it. Like, Drake's never going to be that guy to be like, hey, the rest of these guys stink. And, like he's not built that way. But like you can read between the lines, like that's what's going through his head. I get you, Drake. Like I don't fault you at all because I feel that way watching some of the film often these last couple of weeks. So, the routes, speaking specifically to it, that has been an issue throughout the season. We've talked about it before, where it's like the Falcons, when you go against man coverage this year, have been one of the worst offenses or passing offenses in the NFL. And a lot of that is owed to some of the routes that these guys are asked to run that are really basic and just kind of like, hey, go get open. And Drake has been the guy that has been most reliable in those situations to go out there and win in man coverage. And unfortunately, like that isn't good enough for the Falcons to overcome a lot of these other deficiencies where, I think I saw a stat from somebody where it was like Penix throwing to Drake versus Penix throwing to anybody else. I don't remember the exact stat, but I saw it floating on Twitter yesterday. And I was just like, yeah, that's a stark reality when it comes to what this offense looks like when they're force feeding the ball to Drake London and trying to get the ball to other playmakers.
Yeah. And I think that when you look at yesterday's game, like, I think Kyle Pitts' drop was the start of it, like because he probably takes that one into the end zone. Just from my eyeballs looking at it from that standpoint, and that kind of goes back to, and then D-Led tweeted out that Michael Penix was kind of being a little aggressive in his conversation with Kyle Pitts after that, and just based off of Kyle Pitts' history with quarterbacks who are willing to say things to him, I don't know how great he received that conversation or that dialogue that came from Michael Penix's mouth. So this is, and then Darnell Mooney, like it's just almost like when he's targeting Darnell Mooney, it's almost like you're throwing a ball into the abyss. I know it's not going to be a catch. And then when you have the drop like he did, I mean, that was kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak. So I wasn't surprised that he dropped the ball because sometimes when Michael Penix is throwing the ball, you just don't know where it's going to go. And I didn't think I would be saying that 9 games in during the season. So, but from you, Maria, when you think about the totality of the situation, where this offense is, what Drake said, how Zach Robinson has been questioned whether or not he's a offensive coordinator, even to offensive coordinator in his league. Do you feel like that he's lost this offense? He's lost the pass catchers in that locker room, that to the point where Zach Robinson can't return essentially next year.
Here's what I've noticed about Drake, who, Drake is so much better than he gets credit for a lot of the times, just given the nature of some of the offenses that he's been a part of here in Atlanta. What I've noticed about Drake is he doesn't really give out shade unless he really means it. You know what I mean? He's not really one to just kind of spew things. Like he doesn't really just say stuff like that unless he's really feeling some frustration.
Sure.
He did that whenever they changed quarterbacks because he was very fond of Kirk Cousins, as we know. He was having a very good year with him at quarterback, and he was like obviously incredibly frustrated because he was on yet another quarterback since he's been in Atlanta. It takes a lot to get Drake fired up in front of the media and for him to say something of that caliber. And it's never anything crazy. He doesn't have any like outward bursts and dramatic and, you know, whatever. It's very subtle and it's very succinct and it's very, oh, he said what? And that's exactly what I felt from Drake. So that makes me nervous because when Drake does stuff like that, then people got to pay attention.
Yeah.
So when I heard him say that, I thought, oh, okay, Zach may be in trouble. That is a very, very obvious, hey, I'm just doing what I'm told to do.
Yeah. It's almost like that child that is trying to do right, you know, like you try to, you got the child that's sitting in the back of class and is bad all the time. I feel like that's Drake. You know what I'm saying? He's trying to do right. You know, he's doing right by going out there and doing his doggone thing on the field. You know, the 3 touchdowns, you know, being a super ridiculous red zone threat for this team. And I don't know where they would be without him in the red zone. Probably how they were at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
They were struggling in the red zone. So everything is all good when that type of player is flourishing. But soon as things aren't going right, I'm sure he's not the only one that feels this way. Especially when you're talking about him being a leader, a guy being willing to step up and say certain things in certain moments. I feel like he's kind of just replicating and turning it into a Drake statement, you know, based off the conversations he's already had with his teammates. And with that being said, Free, I know we kind of touched on it a little bit in a previous Falcons Squad, but I want to kind of get your thoughts as we wrap up the show. Like, would firing Zach Robinson do anything as far as getting this offense better going forward?
This year? Or are you asking this year?
I'm talking about just for this year, strictly for this year.
I mean, I have a hard time buying TJ Yates being the savior of the Atlanta Falcons. I'm sorry. Like, I don't. Again, we don't know because he's never really been a play caller, but based off of the one preseason game that he called, like, I wasn't sitting here going like, oh man, TJ Yates, like this is the future. Like, oh man, no, did you see that screen pass that he ran?
It would be very Falcony of you if you would have done that though. Yeah.
You know, so like I don't sit here thinking, like, to me, the Zach Robinson conversation is very similar to the Michael Penix conversation, where it's just like, you just got to figure it out, my guy. Like that's kind of it with Zach Robinson. And you got 8 games to figure it out. He hasn't quite figured it out. Hopefully he does, because if he doesn't, then I don't think he's going to be back next year. And I don't think a lot of other people are going to be back next year. So we will see on that front. But like, I don't think like firing Zach Robinson is going to be some magic bullet, because you don't really have an experienced play caller on staff that's going to be like, okay, well, I know what I'm doing, right? Like, the only person you have is Ken Zampese as a senior assistant, and he was not very successful in the 2 times that he called plays in the NFL. Essentially, if I'm not mistaken, got fired after 1 year in both instances. So like, that's not necessarily a savior. So unless you're really betting on some prodigy play caller that has just been waiting in the wings the entire time as an assistant coach, that is just chomping at the bit to get that opportunity, it's like, I know exactly how to fix this offense. And if you do have those answers, my guy, like, can you walk down the hall and share those answers with Zach Robinson? Because if you so like, I don't sit there thinking like there's some savior already on staff. So firing Zach Robinson to me doesn't really accomplish anything, but it's certainly, you know, it's more about the punishment than solving a problem, I guess.
What about you, Maria?
I don't think that firing him in the middle of the season does anything for you. I really don't. And I know that maybe that's unpopular against what the fans want and think. And I understand, because you want consequences for a team that's struggling, and you see other teams making, you know, these firings and these moves. And so someone has to fall on the sword for things. And you already saw that with like Hilliard, and that didn't really accomplish a lot. It did for a minute, and now it's like, oh, okay, like what did that really accomplish? And who on the staff has experience calling plays? Aaron laid it out perfectly. TJ Yates has done a preseason game. Why would that be any different than Zach Robinson? Because he was a first-time play caller last year. He's literally in his second year calling plays at any level. And so I don't understand why that would just automatically fix all of the issues on offense this season. Now, if you want to look at it in the offseason, bring somebody in, okay, whatever, that's fine to me. But I think in the middle of this season that let's say they lose to Carolina, what would that accomplish? It doesn't, to me, it does nothing for you. In fact, it probably hurts you because you're now moving personnel around yet again. This would be the second time on offense so far this year that they've done that. So obviously the offensive coordinator, a lot more drastic than a wide receivers coach when it comes to personnel and play calling, but I don't think it solves a single thing by doing it midseason. The only thing it says is, hey, we know that it's not working with him, so we're going to let him go. What's any different from doing that at the end of the year when you're not going to make the playoffs anyway? That's just my opinion. But I understand the sense of urgency and people want it and I get it. But when you fire people with no plan, to me, that's just bad management. And absolutely. I would rather take emotions out of it, which to the Falcons' detriment has really hurt them over a long period of time. Being emotionally attached to people has gotten them in trouble. So I think take the emotions out of it and do yourself a favor, let it play out for the rest of the year, and then make the decision in the offseason if you want to go that route.
Yeah, I think that based off of what I've seen with Zach Robinson and his play calling capabilities, there's no reason for you to fire him at this moment. It's not going to do anything for you because it's his scheme. It's what he feels can have success. I've thought there were moments in the game against the Indianapolis Colts that you had success. Like that package with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier in there at the same time, that does exactly what offense is supposed to do. Make the defense think, make the defense question what's going on, and make them question where the ball is going. And unfortunately, a lot of times when they aren't in that particular formation, that's not the case. You know where the ball is going most of the time. You know when they go in motion, like, oh, okay, yeah, Bijan Robinson over there dancing around over there. Oh, yeah, he's waiting for the ball. So the ball snap. Yeah, okay, he's about to get the rock. Okay. So, I think that it has to be more of the window dressing, more of a sense of urgency on offense. I just don't see it. I don't see it at all. It's so methodical. It's so just, man, I can drink a whole cup of coffee on one play, seemingly. It's just like the defense is just sitting there waiting, like, okay, we know what you're going to do, so just go ahead and run the play. But yeah, I think that making those changes right now is just too many different variables that are going to have an effect on you in a negative way if you do that at this juncture. But yeah, wait till the offseason if that's where you want to go. All right, well, thank you for making the Falcons Squad your first listen today. Why don't you try out for your second listen? My main man, Aaron Freeman on Locked On Falcons. He got that fire and brimstone waiting for you every single day, babe. I can't wait to check out what Freeman gonna be talking about today. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just makes my day, man. I don't know why you looking like that. It makes my day. It literally makes my day. Check you out. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's throwing shade at me or
throwing fire, one of the
throwing fire,
Yeah. Throws fire sometimes.
Or setting his house on fire. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what you're gonna get, man. So yeah, make sure you check him out. Also, you can check out the rock star that is Maria Martin that you just heard right now on 11 Alive on Sports Extra on Sundays. She lets me come on there every now and then. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I know that's hard for you to believe. Don't look at me like that. I hear you. I see you. But
Aaron's been on there too.
Huh?
Aaron's been on there too.
Aaron has been on there as well. So yeah, maybe we can get a show with all of us on there. Ooh.
Love it.
Yes.
Maria's like, no, I don't want that.
Well, as long as you don't light a paper on fire, I will fully sign off. Okay? We can't start the show with all of us having a person, but yeah.
So yes, make sure you guys come back on Thursday and enjoy our foolishness that we're going to have for you on Thursday. So we'll see you then.